Hi there, Ron Gula from Gula Tech Adventures. Today we're going to play a game, Is It Vulnerable? Now, at Gula Tech Adventures, we get questions. When I was running Tenable Network Security, we get questions. Even as a pen tester for the NSA, I get questions. Hey, I've got a vulnerability. Somebody wants to fix it. Somebody else thinks it's a risk we can live with. You're going to run into this regardless if you're new to security or been in security for 20 years. So I'm going to give you a bunch of examples, and hopefully you can pull something from this. So if you're in this situation, you can make a proper risk assessment. So one of the days at Tenable, I had a customer complain about the rating of a vulnerability. They basically said a CVSS score of 7 was too high. They thought it was 6.9. And what they didn't tell us was that, well, 7 and above they had to patch, 6.9 was good to go. Let me tell you, if you fixed all your 7s through 10s and all you got left is your 6.9s and below, you've got a major vulnerability in your organization. You've done a good job getting rid of your 7s and 10, don't get me wrong. But if those 6.9, 5.0 CVSS vulnerabilities, they can be exploitable just like anything else. So that's definitely a vulnerability. What about complex passwords? In this day of two-factor authentication, I actually get questions a lot. Hey, I've got an account or I've got a strong password and I'm the only one with it and I'm using it. Yeah, if that's your case, that's not vulnerable, right? Now, if that password is used on a SaaS platform that's been compromised, or is that your same password you're using lots of places, that's a problem, right? That's a problem. This by itself, one system, not a vulnerability. Don't need to add two-factor authentication. If you can remember this password, you're fine with this. What about sleeping demons? Now, during the Log4j sort of, I'll call it the response, the pandemic, whatever you want, there was a lot of computers out there that had the Log4j software, but it wasn't running. So think about a web server or maybe a library for that web server on a system that wasn't running. So when you get something like a Linux operating system, you get a bunch of daemons. You have to configure which daemons you want to run or not run. I call a daemon that's not running a sleeping daemon, hence the image here. So if it's not running, it's not vulnerable, right? You can't exploit something that's not running. But a lot of times if you do a patch audit and you ask the question, hey, on this computer, are there a list of missing security patches? Yes, there are. It's for stuff you're not running, but do you need to patch it? Well, you might patch it. And this kind of gets into some of the nuances of mandates to fix certain vulnerabilities, but versus saying, are we really fixing an exploitable problem? I actually say not only is this not vulnerable, but you should take the opportunity to move that workload to a container system where you don't have an attack surface where you have to manage libraries and daemons and things like that, which could get turned on inadvertently in the future. What about two browsers? What about a fully patched Chrome and a fully patched Firefox? Is one really more secure than the other? I kind of say no. It's not. And a lot of people will say, hey, look, you're maximizing your attack surface, right? If I've got multiple browsers, I got Edge, I got Chrome, I got Firefox. Look, a fully patched target, you need to burn a 0-day to kind of get into that. And, that's kind of the reality of what we are. So if you have two different systems, you could say, well, a Firefox 0-day and a Chrome 0-day have more. The reality is if somebody's going to burn a 0-day to break into you, you probably have a lot more software volatility or variation in there than just Chrome and Firefox. Now, a lot of shops out there, they mandate, hey, we're only going to run Edge. We're only going to run stuff that we can manage through Microsoft. Sure, that's great. Maybe I can get you with a PowerPoint vulnerability, maybe an Excel vulnerability, maybe a OneNote vulnerability. There's still a lot of targets out there. And, that's the way you have to kind of look at this. So I don't try to fight this fight of like mandating browsers and whatnot. If you want to have total control over somebody's desktop experience, that's great. You're going to have a different user experience, though, than if you kind of let people run your own software. Again, as long as it's fully patched, I'm saying it's not a vulnerability. All right, second to last thing, Python. A lot of times we're going to run into situations where we're auditing a Linux host or some sort of container, and there's an API out there being written in Python. Well, Python has a feature where, usually if you have a Python script, you have to load Python libraries so your scripts can do things. Well, this creates, if you have multiple Python scripts running on the same computer, you can actually have a complex set of libraries, and those libraries could have vulnerabilities such as Log4j or other types of vulnerabilities that are out there. So Python, to sort of mitigate this management thing, you can actually have different Python virtual environments for each Python script. And what this allows me to do is have one set of libraries for one Python script and another completely set of libraries for another Python script, and they're isolated. So the question then is, if I got multiple Python APIs on the same computer, one of those Python APIs has got a vulnerability in their library, but the Python script is calling that library in a manner that's not exploitable. Is it vulnerable? No, it's not. Now, again, you might have an edict come out like we must patch log4j. So even a vulnerability in a library that's being called securely, many libraries have multiple APIs you can call. If you're not calling the vulnerable API, it's not an issue. Still, though, management says you've got to patch these vulnerabilities. You got to patch them. But is it vulnerable? It's not. All right, last thing we're going to talk about, though, is what about banners? Now, this is something that I think a lot of people, when they do a vulnerability scan, they find out for the first time that this isn't a false positive. This is basically on the network. When you connect to a service like a web browser or an SSH daemon, it reports what it is. And many Linux systems lie about what version they actually are. So if you're using like Shodan or a commercial version that does similar things to Shodan, you're going to see this a lot, where you will look into an organization's IT footprint. You'll see all these banners, and you really won't know if they're patched or not. As a matter of fact, Red Hat actually has a policy here that it talks about the banners and backporting and why they do this. And, one of the reasons, there's some obscurity here. It's, security through obscurity is not a thing, but it is a layer, and it does help in some cases. But for the most part, these banners can be confusing. So a lot of times if you have banners, you really don't have enough information to kind of see these things. And it's hard to say. It really is hard to say. I highly recommend organizations who are doing this banner thing use a vulnerability scanner that can do some further fingerprinting of these banners. You can kind of look through that high-level banner and literally see if it's a vulnerable version of something you need to be worried about. If you're not doing it, some hackers are going to do it. And so, of course, you could also back this up with a patch audit. Now, a theme through all of this stuff is it vulnerable? Maybe that's not the question you're asking. Maybe is it compliant, right? If the rule is thou shalt patch log4j, that's a compliance requirement, right? But a lot of times you also heard me say, is it exploitable? Because that's really what it comes down to, right? Do you have a situation that somebody can exploit? Now, if you got an edict on high, it's compliant, that's good too. But these are the things you need to think about when you're answering these questions. I'm Ron Gula. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you want to see more, subscribe to us here at YouTube. Come see us at gula.tech or ping me on LinkedIn. Have a great day.